Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again. I'm Martin Ballard and welcome to episode 78 of this podcast series. And this time we're turning our attention on technology to discuss lighting and sound.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
In the last episode, I was joined by Imagine's artistic director, Eric Potts, and the TV, film and panto actor, James McInerney. Now, if you missed that or any of the other previous episodes, you can, of course, still listen to them, and there are many, many more to come from one of the UK's biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre. So make sure you subscribe where you normally get your podcasts. And don't forget, if you have any questions about Imagine Theatre or pantomime in general, then please send them in using the Get in Touch section of the website at imaginetheatre.co.uk, and we'll answer another of those questions later on in this episode. So again, this time we're turning our attention to two of the most crucial areas of technology with theatre in general and pantomime in particular, as we'll be finding out about the roles of lighting and sound designers. And joining me this time is lighting designer Matt Ladkin and sound designer Mike Thacker. Welcome both.
Hi, thank you.
Matt, let's start with you. I mean, I mentioned that your titles are lighting and sound, but you've both done an awful lot more than that, I have to say. But Matt, tell us a bit about you and maybe the first time you ever saw a panto.
I'm a lighting designer. I also associate, and I'm also a lighting programmer. For me, the first memories of panto are as a kid. My family was heavily into theatre, so we used to see 3 every year. We were very fortunate in the area that we were in, so we used to see local productions in Colchester, Ipswich and Cambridge.
Do you remember the first one you ever saw and what sort of impact it might have had?
That is a great question. I think it was a production of Cinderella at the Mercury in Colchester. It would have been the early 90s. I'm showing my age there. But for me, that was kind of my first ever experience of theatre. I was probably 4, maybe 5 at the time. And I was just probably blown away by the sparkle, the excitement and just the general sense of enjoyment that everybody was getting from a pantomime.
What sort of impact did it have on you visually? Were you aware of the lighting and the effects that created?
Absolutely nothing at all. I was very young, so I think for me it was more just about the fact that there were these 20-odd crazy people singing and dancing in front of me on the stage.
Now, Mike, I mentioned that you're much more than a sound designer. You're also head of project engineering at Orbital Sound, of course. But do you remember your first experience of panto?
Yeah, I do. I wasn't as lucky as Matt to have seen 3 a year, I don't think. But I remember going and seeing several sort of local church hall pantomimes were probably my earliest memory. I distinctly remember a production of Jack and the Beanstalk, but my sort of first big pantomime would have been seeing one at the Bristol Hippodrome. I can't actually remember what it was, but I would have been a little bit older by then. I would have sort of been 12 or 13, I think.
And did it automatically whet your appetite? Did it inspire you? Is that one of the reasons why you might have gone into the industry?
If I'm brutally honest, I come from a fairly theatrical background in terms of my family. So we were always involved in theatre in various different areas. And actually, pantomime when I was young was not something that we got involved in very much. We went to see it, but we weren't involved with it. And it wasn't until I was working professionally that I actually got involved in pantomime, at all. And now I am sort of hooked. And I don't think I'll ever escape now.
Matt, tell us how you got involved in the industry then. What was your journey from seeing panto as a school kid to working in professional theatre?
I started out in youth theatre and amateur dramatics in a couple of little local venues that we had. I started out acting when I was probably 6 or 7, and then started moving and becoming aware of technical theatre when I was probably about 10 or 11. And started getting involved in building sets, helping out with the local productions. Then moved to my what then became my first ever theatre, which was the Mercury Theatre in Colchester. Was offered a casual technician role there when I was 16. So I started helping out with get-ins and get-outs of their company shows and also visiting companies and stuff like that. They offered me a full-time job as a technician there when I was 18. Stayed there for a few years. Went freelance and kind of worked my way up the ladder from being a lighting technician through to a lighting programmer, And then in sort of the last 10, 15 years, I've been designing, and probably in the last 10, I would say that I've moved over, and the majority of my work now is design work.
And it's not just obviously theatre, obviously a lot of panto, not just theatre, it's dance, it's concerts. You're a production manager as well. You've done all sorts of things over the years. And I think it's fair to say both lighting and sound, but let's talk about lighting first of all, is a lot more technical than it used to be. I mean, I'm a lot older than you, but back in the day when I first started, it was floods, spots, gobos, and gels, and that's about it. When movers came in and LEDs, it gave you so much more potential, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology, certainly, even in the last, 15, 20, 25 years that I've been actively involved in the industry, has come on leaps and bounds. It's become a lot cheaper, so it's a lot more accessible. A lot more shows now have the ability to be able to use very complicated lighting systems with, rigs of, whereas even 10 years ago, having 10 or 20 moving lights on a show was a fairly big amount of money. Now, even mid to small scale shows can have 50, 100 moving lights on them quite easily because they've become a lot more accessible.
Yeah, and the other key area was computerization, computerized desks and so on, made it a hell of a lot easier, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you say easier, I would say it's probably got harder. Back when I started, you pushed up a fader on a lighting desk and a light turned on. Now you've got computer programs that are incredibly complicated that are controlling maybe 50 or 60 different aspects of one light on its own.
Well, let's put it this way. It's harder for you, but easier for the operator, maybe.
Absolutely. Yes. Much easier these days.
Joking apart, though, all of that new technology in both sound and lighting has actually made it more exciting in a way, hasn't it? Because it's allowed you to be even more creative.
The technology, especially moving lights, now allows me a much richer playground as a designer, and I'm able to make changes to the look and feel of a show instantly, which obviously speeds up the tech process. It means that we're not waiting on having to physically be able to get access to a light to change its color, the pattern, its size, its shape, or where it's pointing, because now I can do all of that remotely from the lighting desk.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? And of course, it opens up all sorts of other creative possibilities.
Advancements in the control technology that we have in the lighting desk specifically have obviously allowed us to control more lights that do more things than ever before. And it means that we can create really complex lighting sequences that can be connected through various show control technologies with the band and with sound effects, so that we can create a lot more complex lighting sequences than we'd ever been able to before. As a designer, it's made my life a lot better because I can offer a lot more to a production, but obviously it means that the lighting programmers have a much harder time now, as the possibilities of what I can do and what I want them to do are pretty much endless.
And Mike, what about you? What was your road from, schoolboy, and you mentioned your family's involvement in theatre. What was your journey to getting involved in the industry?
Yeah, so similar to Matt to start with, came up through, amateur dramatics locally, and my uncle was a professional actor and director. So sort of always been involved in the industry. And then similar, once I hit sort of 11 or 12, if I wasn't in the shows, then I was working backstage on the shows, and started finding that I was much better at that than I was on stage. Let's just put it that way. And then I applied to Rose Bruford and went and did stage management and technical theatre. So many people in my year basically said, "You're really good at sound. That's what you should do." So that's what I did do. And I just moved through there, graduated, got a job in the West End, start with depping on Mamma Mia, the part at Mamma Mia, and then on to Jerry Springer, the opera, and moved my way up the ranks to become a sound number one. From there, became a production engineer, associate designer, and a designer in my own right. 6 years ago, I got offered a job here at Orbital, and I now head up education at Orbital. I do design work for Orbital. I do some engineering for Orbital, and I look after all our computer systems at Orbital as well.
Yeah, and the team there, I mean, you're involved, rather like Matt, in all sorts of things, aren't you? All sorts of live events, exhibitions, car launches, award ceremonies, all sorts of stuff.
Predominantly theatre, but yeah, on the whole, we do Absolutely everything. If it needs event sound, we will be involved in it. Pantomime for us is probably one of the biggest times of the year, though. But yeah, we're involved in anything that gets thrown to us to provide sound equipment to.
Okay, Mike, tell us a bit about your involvement in, let's just take one particular pantomime. What's your involvement from the earliest meeting through to tech?
Panto is an interesting one. It's one area of the industry where the creative teams really have to talk to each other all the time from day one. It's not necessarily all the time that I will speak to a lighting designer at day one, but actually with pantomime, they're so intrinsically linked, lighting and sound together, so that everything is clocked together, everything's working together. So I would be talking to the director, obviously, the musical director. From my point of view, obviously music is very, very important. The musical director and the lighting designer to have first meetings and work out where we go with the show. I mean, from a panto point of view, a lot of the time the pantos are sort of preset with how many people we're going to have in the cast, therefore how many radio mics we've got on the show. Similarly to Matt saying about moving lights, in the last 10 or 15 years, we've gone from pantomimes that might have had 4, 6 radio mics on the principal cast to now everybody being radio mic'd on the stage. And the technology has improved, and we're able to do that on all our shows. So yeah, I would say from day one, we're talking to all the rest of the creative team to try and make everything gel together.
I guess one of the biggest things that can make a difference in a panto in terms of the mix and so on is, some venues will have a live band, others won't. Obviously, there'll possibly be a track. I'm sure there'll be a track for both of those shows. But in terms of the mix itself, there are different challenges. There might be a lot of stuff that a live band can do live in terms of spot effects and so on that will have to be, played in by a sound operator. So that makes the two areas slightly different, doesn't it?
I don't think we'll ever get away from having live sound operators. By that, I mean a human being. Particularly on pantomime, spot sound effects are an enormously important element to the comedy of the show. And the sound operator is always watching the stage for that. The sound designer is putting those sound effects in. And as you say, if you've got a live band, there's potential that some of those sound effects can come from the drum kit or the percussion section. But if you don't have a live band, then that's all going to be pushed go by the sound operator.
In terms of the songs as well, of course, slightly easier maybe if you've got a track rather than a live band to get the mix right.
Yes and no. It's easier in a way if you've got a band because you have people that you can go and talk to. And if the guitar is too loud in one moment, you can ask the guitarist to play quieter. Whereas if it's embedded within a track, sometimes you're able to split them up and make the guitar quieter, but there's other times where you can't do that. So it swings and roundabouts on that.
All of this will be done in the build-up, maybe in terms of the design at least. And then once everybody gets into the venue, what's your involvement there?
Once we're into the venue, I'm then listening to the entire PA, the sound system. Some theatres will have sound systems installed already. At Christmas time, we'll put out sound systems and computers to nearly 40 pantomimes nationwide from Orbital. And my responsibility is to listen to that and work out how it should sound. Obviously, talking to the director and the musical director at the same time to make sure we're all, singing from the same hymn sheet.
Acoustics is an interesting one as well because every auditorium is different. And of course, it's always totally different in an empty auditorium for tech compared to a full house, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've lost count of the amount of times a director has said to me, it might be a bit too loud when we're in tech, and then it fills up with 1,000 screaming children for the panto, and suddenly it's nowhere near loud enough.
Matt, in terms of your involvement, again, like Mike, you're going to be involved pretty much early on for each of the shows, aren't you, in terms of meetings and so on?
So I usually get contracted for a pantomime season in January or February of that year, and then start meetings about the shows usually in March or April. By May, I'll usually start to send out equipment lists to our lighting vendors so that I can get pricing back and see what equipment I'm able to get for the production budgets that have been allocated to the show. Then after that, I'll usually have an initial design kind of by the middle of July. It all depends on if we have a new set being built for the show, and that obviously means that I'm waiting to get plans and drawings of that from the scenic designer, or if we're using one of the stock sets that already exist. Then we'll have a series of meetings over the summer and hone in on what we are actually wanting to achieve. I'll then revise my design and try to get the final design signed off kind of by the middle of September.
And again, every venue is different. Every auditorium is different. What changes once you get into the venue itself? Do you have to modify the design sometimes?
Absolutely. The biggest thing that obviously changes from me personally is the front of house areas and the available positions where I can put light within the auditorium itself. Some venues have really great front of house positions with which you can put decent lights into and get really good angles, and other venues have very little ability. Once you get onto stage, it becomes a lot more uniform because all of the sets that certainly we work with at Imagine are of the same size. So, you know, your space between all of the different portals is identical. So on stage is very easy. It's always the auditorium that's harder for me.
Yeah, and thankfully as well, something else that's changed over the years is you don't have to either lower all the bars or go up into the ceiling on a cherry picker or a ladder and focus every individual light.
Absolutely. I mean, moving lights have certainly helped in that sense. I will always try and put lights that are hard to reach as moving lights, because then it only needs to be put up once and I can then change its color, its size, the image, everything remotely without having to involve people.
And in terms of the color and, you know, where something is lit from, whether it's lit from the side or above or below, or whether you're embedding LEDs into the pros for effect and so on, who makes those decisions? Is that a joint decision between you and the director of the show, or are you given free rein and then the director will say it's okay? Yeah, I approve.
So I will have meetings with director, choreographer, musical director, the other designers, so sound set, costume, potentially video as well, and then also the musical arranger and the producers, so that we can talk through any specific ideas or visual effects that we want to create, so that I can make sure that obviously any design that I'm creating will be able to facilitate those really easily. And then we'll continue having those meetings when we get new script revisions, and that usually happens right up until probably about 2 or 3 weeks before rehearsals begin, and the rehearsal scripts are sent out to the cast.
So, Mike, how many pantos do you actually work on each year?
Well, I'm responsible for looking after a lot of pantos that I'm not directly designing. So at Orbital here, we supply 40 pantomimes a year, and we can have a phone call at any point in time over the Christmas period that says something has gone wrong and they need a new piece of equipment in any of our venues, you know, all the way up in Scotland or down on the South Coast. So regularly I will be jumping from panto to panto. In terms of design, I generally do 2 or 3 a year. And the only reason I don't do any more is, as Matt will probably tell you the same thing, is that physically you run out of time. The shows open all within a sort of 3-week, 4-week period. So if you're spending a few days at each venue, you can only do sort of 3. Maybe Matt might manage to do 4, but yes, I sort of look after and am responsible within the team here at Orbital for, 40 pantos a year. But I don't design obviously all of those. I design 2 or 3.
Can you top that, Matt?
Fortunately, I can't. There is certainly no way that I want to be looking after 40 shows. I typically do 3 in a year. As Mike says, I have on occasion done 4, but I think by the time that you get to the 4th one, it's time to say no to any more.
Yeah, I have to say though, Matt, I mean, even while you're actually doing that, once you're in the venues and you're actually getting the shows ready, you're still planning and thinking about other shows because there are other things that you're doing apart from panto at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I've got 11 or 12 shows running, which may or may not need my attention at any point.
What's it like for you? Because again, you're involved so early on, you see it all the way through to tech. You're probably there for dress rehearsal, maybe not always, but probably. And then once the show is opened, you've gone. So you don't see what the audience's reaction is like and so on. Is that a bit frustrating at times?
It can be frustrating. I'm very fortunate, obviously, with all of the shows, the company managers from the productions will send daily show reports. And a lot of the company managers that I work with will add really nice little comments about audience reactions and any particular moments and things that an audience really appreciates. But yeah, it does get annoying. I think I've only ever seen one or two of my shows actually open. And I think for Imagine, this will be my 21st or 22nd panto this year that I'm doing with them. And yeah, I've only seen one or two of them actually open with an audience.
I find that really, really weird, though. I don't know whether you'd agree, but it's almost like Steven Spielberg directing a movie, editing it, and then never seeing the final product.
If I'm really lucky, I get to watch the opening show of the last pantomime I light each year with an audience. But even then, I'm usually actually moving on to another project outside of pantomime, and so can't always see them. It is a strange way of working, as most of the other shows I work on have a period of audience previews for a few weeks where all of the creative team watch the shows nightly, see what the audience are responding to, and then make changes the following day that we wish to improve the show. We then show lock, usually the day before press night. And at that point, I would then leave the process. But obviously with pantomime, the schedule's a lot shorter, so there simply isn't the time to do that.
Yeah, it's the same for you, Mike, as well, isn't it? Is it frustrating for you?
I mean, I generally stay until sort of second performance, which is normally on the same day. We do first and second performances on the same day. But obviously, from a sound point of view, the acoustics changing in the space, it's really important to be there for the first couple of shows. So yeah, I normally try and stay there for the first show, but then it is strange moving on. I mean, as Matt said, you're sort of your company managers, but from my point of view as well, my sound operators in each of the venues generally keep in touch through the run about any issues, any things that might pop up, any changes, understudies going on at the last minute quite a lot of the time on pantomime is something that the sound department have to be really, really aware of. So quite often I'm in touch with my sound operators almost on a daily basis throughout the Christmas period.
Now, there are so many shows that you've both worked on that, people listening to this podcast will have been to see. I absolutely loved Back to the Future. That was one of yours, wasn't it? And there are so many others, Hamilton, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and so on. What are you working on at the moment, Mike?
We've just sent Frozen out to Holland. We're just opening in a couple of weeks' time, Passing Strange at the Young Vic. And myself and Matt are doing a production of Grease at the Coventry Belgrade in a couple of weeks' time.
And Matt, you do not just theatre and stuff, but you've done quite a bit of film and television as well, haven't you?
Yes, I've done the occasional TV drama and feature film project in the past, especially over the COVID pandemic, when obviously the live events industry all shut down. I've mostly worked, though, in theatre, outdoor trails and large-scale corporate events. Currently, I'm part of the lighting design team for the Paddington Bear Experience in London, which is a new immersive family show that opens at the end of the month. And then I'm in pre-production for a few musicals over the summer and autumn before it's once again panto season.
I'm going to ask you both one final question. I'll start with you, Matt. If you could choose one, what would be your favourite panto title?
So I'd say my favourite pantomime title is Dick Whittington, although I've never actually worked on a production of it. I saw it at the Mercury Theatre in Colchester when I was probably about 13 or 14. And by that point, I decided that I wanted to pursue a career in technical theatre. That production had just been superbly designed and the cast were first class. So it's really stuck with me as a benchmark of how good pantomime can be. It's a shame it's not often part of a venue's pantomime repertoire now, as I'd love to be able to light a production of it.
And what about your favourite panto to light?
So in terms of actually lighting a pantomime, I think my favourite title I've worked on would have to be Beauty and the Beast. It's got a really fantastic story and it's very musical, and as such that offers itself to being able to play around with some real dark atmospheric moments, and it's got a really great variety of locations like the forest, the castle exteriors, the ballroom, the village, and it makes it more fun to light as there's obviously a lot more variety in what I can do. Also, a lot of the productions that I've worked on with Imagine have had a load of live scene changes, which adds to the magic. And obviously it's got the beast transformation scenes. And for me, it's got the best opportunities to get as many atmospheric effects like haze, smoke, low fog, pyrotechnics into a production, and I love working with all of those.
Mike, what about you? What would be your favourite panto title?
I probably have two. My favourite, just from personal reasons, as I love it, is Cinderella. But from a sound point of view, as much as you want to make the show really beautiful, it doesn't offer brilliant sound effects opportunities. So from that point of view, from a sound point of view, probably Jack and the Beanstalk, being able to deal with how you're going to scare children enough with the giant without actually making them cry and leave the theatre.
Both of those have all the ingredients for a perfect panto. I don't know whether you'd agree, Mike, but I think at the centre of both of these is such a great adventure. And for kids, that's what keeps it exciting and keeps the story moving, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, Cinderella is just a personal favourite, but yeah, Jack and the Beanstalk, again, a perfect panto story.
Is it a highlight of your year compared to all the things that you also work on? And we've mentioned many of them. What makes you love panto so much, Matt?
I absolutely love working on pantomime. For me, it's a really important part of British theatre. Firstly, because obviously it's a financial lifeline for a lot of our regional venues. And also for many of the audiences, it's their first experience of live theatre. When it's done well, it stands up amongst, I think, the best theatre in the country. And as such, I take it very seriously. But at the same time, I also have a lot of fun doing it. They are usually really fun shows. It allows a lot of creative freedom in terms of lighting, and especially with Imagine, the team there are all great fun to work with, and I've loved the last 8 years lighting various titles for them and hopefully lighting them for many more years to come.
And Mike, because there's so much imagination and so many different sort of areas of the panto genre you can explore in sound, is that one of the reasons why you love it so much?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I didn't get into doing pantos until later on in my career, but I've sort of come to really love it, and it is the best, really is the best time of the year. Even though we've talked about how difficult it is moving from one venue to another, seeing the children absolutely excited, and now my own child as well going to see pantomime, seeing the smiles on the faces of the children at the end of the show, honestly, is a fantastic thing.
We wish you all the best with all of the incredible projects you're working on for the rest of this year and into 2025. Have another fabulous panto season, no matter how many shows you're working on. Matt and Mike, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank
Martin.
you.
And before we finish, another of your questions, and this time it's one for Imagine's joint CEO, Steve Bowden. And the question this time is this: will we see new panto titles in the coming years?
At Imagine, we're always developing new pantomime titles. We think it's really important that we offer choice to venues and to audiences, particularly where there's a strong tradition of pantomime in the area. Titles that we rolled out in the previous season for the first time were productions of Treasure Island and also The Little Mermaid. Both of these titles were very well received by the audiences, and it just creates a very exciting and vibrant pantomime dynamic for the performers, who are obviously playing roles that they've perhaps not had the chance to play before. We're also looking at other titles this year. We're going to do a production of Robin Hood, which has been a title that used to take place a lot in theatres but hasn't been around that often in recent years. So, yes, in answer to that question, we're always going to try and find new panto titles to tell.
Thanks again, Steve, and that's it for another episode. Don't forget to keep your questions about Imagine Theatre or pantomime in general coming in via the Get in Touch section of the website at imaginetheatre.co.uk. Make sure you subscribe through your favourite podcast app, and join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 79, when we'll be looking in more detail at how to get into theatre and stage management in particular, with two members of the Imagine team who've been through the training process recently.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.